Hello and welcome to the Give Me the Remote podcast. This is episode 40. It is the 28th of May 2019. My name is John. I'm joined in the pod by...
Sheridan.
And it's big anniversaries.
Is it?
We've had the first birthday of this podcast.
Oh, have we?
We have.
Oh, great.
And we've also ticked over 2,000 downloads.
That's amazing.
2,000 people's a lot of people, even if...
It might not be 2,000 individual people, though. It could just be like the same person that's like really obsessed.
I don't think it's the same person.
I know, it's being joking. It was a joke.
But anyway, so thank you all to those who've listened. We love you very, very much. And now on to the business of the podcast. Sheridan, what do we got?
So I think this episode's going to be basically the Olivia Colman show, followed by Game of Thrones.
The Olivia Colman show? Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't make that link.
So let's start off with Fleabag, season 2.
Oh, of course.
Now you're in anticipation for what's next, audience.
Sure. Okay, so Fleabag season 2.
Hi.
Thought you'd be in prison by now.
Oh, well, keep trying, but they just won't have...
Yeah. So we reviewed season 1.
And we loved it.
Yes, loved it. Created by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who also created Killing Eve, which we are partially through, and is rather promising. So she basically plays, how would you describe her? A
30-something woman with the drinking problems and sexual promiscuity that comes with being single at that age.
She's quite self-destructive.
Woman. Yeah. She seemed very familiar to me.
So I was like, it's my life.
I wouldn't say you necessarily, but
I know, little close to the bone, some of it. Although she did in some respects make me feel much better about myself, because I'm like, wow, my life is not that fucked up.
Language.
Sorry.
Language, Sheridan.
So last season was basically about, she had lost her best friend who apparently committed suicide, although that was always a little unclear. And the season ended with it being revealed that she had cheated on her. Is this too spoilery?
I think this is way too spoilery.
Okay, well, I won't.
Let's just say there was an enormous twist at the end of the season. And I think from what you've said, it's not given away yet. So let's just.
I don't know. I think I was pretty given away, but
no, anyway, they're still in doubt. So the first season was hilariously funny. The twist was like mind blowing. Like our jaws were on the floor for an hour afterwards.
Yeah.
And the story had it progressed. It was a story. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. And I think we might have said that we were looking forward to a season 2, but we kind of could have lived with just letting the story go.
Yeah. And
I really feel, in some ways, while I still enjoyed season 2, I kind of wish they'd let it just be one season of TV perfection.
Oh, interesting. Because I've got to say, I was really glad for the season 2.
I was glad to have season 2, but at the same time, it wasn't as funny. There was no beginning, no middle, no end. It went nowhere. It just set up a bridge to season 3, which will go nowhere and go to season 4 until people stop watching.
It was much darker. And
it was much darker to no particular effect.
Well, I mean, this season starts off, she's estranged from her whole family. She's obviously lost her best friend.
And the worst dinner you've ever seen portrayed on
there's
television.
A lot of like really awkward moments, including a really awkward dinner party, an awkward encounter she has with a therapist, where the therapist basically just points out that she's just like really lonely and basically has no one to talk to. One thing that happens in this...
There's all these weird cutscenes and jump scenes surrounding a whole bunch of blood being in a women's toilet that takes quite a long time to unravel as well. But they pretty much knock that all over in episode 1.
Yeah.
So all the dramatic tension of season 1, they sort of crammed into episode 1, and then they just went la 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 la, let's have affairs with inappropriate people.
So, I mean, the main story arc in this is that there's a priest, a young, sexy priest, who appears to marry her father and soon-to-be stepmother.
Olivia Colman.
Who is played by Olivia Colman.
In another very unlikable role, which seems to be her thing at the moment.
Yeah, she plays the stepmom really well. She plays this sort of crazed, like she's a professional artist, a very successful artist, and I think she encapsulates that kind of. I mean, a lot of successful artists have a certain sense of arrogance and grandiosity.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying about Olivia Colman is while there are some similarities between the roles she does, she's far too good an actor to keep trotting out the same personality over and over again. And so just because you really dislike a character she plays doesn't mean you should think you don't like watching her.
No, she's a great actress.
Actor these days, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So anyway, the main story arc is her trying to basically this affair with this priest.
But then some other dude turns up and she has a little mini affair in the middle that seems to go nowhere. I mean, that was very hazy, which is fine because that's how these things are. But I felt that was a little unsatisfying. That diversion in the middle.
Yeah.
And unnecessary.
Yeah, although the character would be sleeping around like that, so...
No, I get that. I get why they did it. I just... and we're going to get to this with Game of Thrones, that in traditional narrative forms, if something's introduced, you want it to pay off. And that doesn't pay off. There's no... You could cut it out without changing the structure of the rest of it. But maybe they just felt they needed to do that for the sake of the character, otherwise it's her just pining over a priest, which is definitely not her.
Yeah.
And the guy she made a sexual harassment complaint against in the first season sort of comes back for a weird cameo at the end and ends up running a cafe.
Oh, I forgot that's who he was.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Look, I really liked the show. Probably the only thing that's a little bit frustrating is you kind of, I guess, are used to having characters that have some sort of redemption arc, and she doesn't have one.
I mean, yeah.
She's basically just wholly accepted how messed up she is.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because, I mean, what's the best outcome that can come from an affair with a Catholic priest? He leaves the priesthood to be with you? That's going to be a pretty morally ambiguous outcome, and that's your best case scenario.
For all of my dislike of organised religion, I have to say there was moments with that priest thing that I felt very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, why do you say that?
Well, it just seemed very wrong. There was really some quite offensive things in there. The confessional booth scene was among the top of the offensiveness.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's long been a problem with young priests.
Look, if there was a priest out there that looked like that dude...
Oh, there's plenty of them.
I'd join the Catholic Church.
There's plenty of them. Now, admittedly, they're a small minority, but, there are thousands of priests, and there's, 2 or 3 of them per 1,000.
But I haven't been going to church enough, obviously.
Yeah. But, I mean, speaking of someone who was raised Christian and used to go to church a lot, it's always been a problem with young priests in that you have a lot of people drawn to the church because they have some mental problems. I'm not by no means saying everyone who's drawn to Christianity has a mental problem.
Yeah, they're looking for something.
They're looking for something to fill.
Not everyone, but
no, there's a lot of, particularly the younger ones are looking for something to fill a void in their life or to repair some damage in their life. And young priests certainly have a lot of temptation thrown their way. And I think that was portrayed reasonably adultly in this.
Yeah, it's quite... I mean, if you're into that, if that's one of your fantasies, this show's probably one you want to get onto. It's quite the... what do you call them? Bodice ripper?
Are any bodices actually ripped?
No.
No, but you can tell it.
But it's sort of... There's a lot of female sexual fantasy that's being put on the screen here.
Yeah, look, I'm going to come back to what's her name, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Oh, that's such the poshest name going, isn't it? Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I really felt with Fleabag, she had saved up a lifetime of stories that she poured into that first season, and I felt this was something that she made. She had more time to make it in her life, but she didn't have years of experience to put into it. And I felt it doesn't stack up next to Fleabag season 1, but I say that in terms of Fleabag season 1 being some of the best television I've ever watched.
Yeah. Oh, look, I really enjoyed season 2. I think I enjoyed it just as much as season 1, and I was very glad it came back. And...
Yeah, well, that priest really moved you, didn't he?
Well, and there's also other cool bits, like then when Kirsten Scott Thomas, who makes a kind of, I think she's in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, cameo as a lesbian businesswoman.
I thought that was a beautifully drawn character. Yeah.
Really, really.
I guess my problem was it was a beautifully drawn character that, again, went nowhere, did nothing, didn't influence the narrative, and seemed wasted. Again, there were a few of those characters that didn't really contribute.
The thing though with the Fleabag, that's the lesson out of it though, isn't it? Is that she doesn't advance or develop. There is no redemption for her.
The story just rolls on, and next year she's a year older. Yeah,
and she's provided with all these kind of learning opportunities, and she doesn't take them.
That could be.
That's what I take away from it.
All right.
And isn't that like life itself, John?
Well, we're going to come back to this argument. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about with this one?
No.
And how much do you want to give it?
Did I give Fleabag 1 5 stars?
I believe so.
I'm going to give it 5 stars as well.
Okay, I'm only going to give it 4. Which I hasten to add is still a good mark. Definitely, if you haven't watched Fleabag at all, go back and watch it. It's on...
I don't think you could watch this.
Oh, you'd be wasting your time not to watch it. And the one is such a better offering anyway. But it's on Amazon Prime. So if you're looking to get your laundry liquid delivered instead of buying it in the store, then pick up an Amazon Prime membership and get yourself some Fleabag on the side.
We should really get those referral services going for Amazon Prime, maybe.
Not embedded on the website.
Might make ourselves 20 cents. Gotta pay for those hosting fees somehow.
Yeah, they'd Amazon Prime would need to put a lot more content on. I mean, my theory on Amazon Prime, we've talked about this before, is that it purely shows that Jeff Bezos wants to watch. And that's okay, because Jeff Bezos has got, for a billionaire, pretty cool taste. And most of it's based on literary titles, and then just a couple of other shows that he wants to watch and being paid to get made. So it's not the worst use that his billions are being put to.
No, and we both have Amazon Prime memberships despite living in the same house, which shows...
I forgot why you got one.
Well, I just got one. To be honest, it's really convenient if you ever forget to buy tampons.
Yeah, right.
You just put that into Amazon and tampons appear on your doorstep the next morning. It's amazing.
Speaking of which, I've got a beanie out there somewhere in the dark and cold. But, yeah. Anyway.
A beanie that's been delivered?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I feel as though we're killing the earth with these little packages that arrive.
It's the packages that are the problem, although they've gotten better at just putting them on envelopes, I feel. Anyhow, Amazon Prime, Fleabag. If you got Amazon Prime and if your shopping needs, fire it up, because Fleabag and a couple of other shows are well worth watching. And on that, we move on. So what's next?
The Favourite.
Dearest Queen, you are mad. Giving me a palace. It is a monstrous extravagance, Mrs. Morley. We are at war.
We won.
Oh, it is not over. We must continue.
Oh, I did not know that.
More Olivia Colman.
This is actually like
a
lot more Olivia Colman.
Yes. This is a weird movie.
So Olivia Colman...
And this won her Best Actress at the Academy Awards, didn't it?
It did. A very well-deserved win. I think she won a BAFTA as well. What?
First time ever the BAFTAs and the Academy Awards have been mentioned in the same sentence.
I think they've lined up quite a lot.
They line up, but the BAFTA is a tenth of the prestige in an Academy Award.
Well, for someone who has English citizenship, I'm not
sure. I know. You know, I've served pints of beer to BAFTA winners.
So Olivia Colman plays Queen Anne, who was a monarch that I had never even really heard of.
I was going to say a very underrated monarch, considering the United Kingdom was created under her watch. Although she tended to be more in the shadow of the powerful men who tried to maneuver around her, and I think that's something that this movie shows reasonably well.
Yeah, although it is inherently a story about women.
It is, and that's the cool thing. But the Duke of Marlborough does sort of flounce in and out, and you get a sense that great events are happening off stage.
So, beginning of the 18th century, and then it basically follows her relationship with two women, one being the Duchess of Marlborough, who's played by Rachel Weisz, who's obviously quite an influential person at court, and another woman called Abigail Mushin, who is played by Emma Stone, who's kind of like a bit of a fallen woman and has to claw her way back out of poverty and position and becomes one of the Queen's ladies in waiting. Is that what she became?
Yeah. Certainly. I mean, we're not going to get in the minutiae of the positions surrounding the crown, but there's a lot of funny sounding titles that. Sorry, we're trying to fight a cat who's trying to jump up on the table, so everything's getting very awkward around here. Moving on, there's a lot of minutiae in these positions, and things that sound very unimportant or even menial are actually very important roles, like Master of the Wardrobe or Mistress of the Wardrobe and things like that, because it means you spend the morning while they're getting dressed handing their shirts to them, and anyone in the realm who wants to get a message to them needs to come and pay you lots of money to pass on a message or to set up a meeting. And that's how the realms were governed in this in the Enlightenment period. And I've never seen a history like this one of this period done from such a female point of view, which is great. But there definitely was a lot in the history books about how you've got John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, Winston Churchill's great grandfather or great uncle, or they are related. Who's off fighting the Battle of Blenheim and winning conquests against Louis XIV and reshaping modern Europe, and then his wife gets in a fight with the Queen and his career is destroyed. So from a male point of view, there's a lot of sympathy for the Duke of Marlborough, whose wife went and got in a fight with the Queen and ruined everything.
So this is one of the best things about this movie is this exploration of what life in court is like, and showing all those kind of intricacies.
And sillinesses and absurdities.
It's actually one of the things that I probably wish I had known going into this. It is a black comedy. It's a funny movie.
Yeah, and I mean...
It's not like funny ha-ha laugh out. Well, there are some funny ha-has, though.
If you get your head in the right moment, there are moments when, there'd just be two women with a pair of lobsters on the floor and someone comes in, what are you doing? Oh, we're making the lobsters race each other and then we're going to eat them.
Yeah. There's actually absurd about it all, but I think we'd be remiss in the review if we didn't point out that, basically the dynamic that's occurring between these three women is the lesbian relationships, which has little historical accuracy, although some historians do say that it had the potential to happen. Apparently the Duchess of Marlborough did actually blackmail Queen Anne about releasing personal letters that were never released, with the assumption being that they had sexual content in there.
It's a funny thing, though. If you're a queen in that period where it's still a ridiculously patriarchal world, taking a male lover is immensely problematic. They make the other men at court jealous. They start throwing their weight around. Maybe they won't, but you can't trust them not to, and you don't need that much trouble. And it was also an era where it was very common for people to share beds just because no one could afford, even the royalty wasn't affording to heat those palaces. So you've got to imagine a little bit of hanky-panky and executive relief was going on, and if you were a queen in that position, a woman who had something to lose by also being exposed as a lesbian would make a very useful partner. Yeah.
Although I have to say, I find it very hard to believe that Queen Anne could have sex with anybody, given the disgusting lifestyle that she apparently led.
With the gouty legs.
Oh, there's so much. It just makes you think, even if you're the Queen, life was rubbish back then. She's just so unhealthy.
Yeah, partly because, the state of medicine was bad, so no one was giving good advice. Partly you couldn't eat fresh food because the water was all full of cholera and worse, so everything had to be boiled and baked. And In fact, food for nobility was often fried, boiled, and baked. I mean, they cooked that stuff to the nth degrees until all you were getting was fats and starches, and then wondering why you were getting ulcerated legs. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought this film was actually kind of a unique royal period drama.
I don't know how you pitched this movie. I mean, how it got made is some sort of mystery. So I'm glad it won an Academy Award just for that. And the acting is fantastic, and it's an odd one for getting your head in the space of.
Yeah.
But you've got to get your head in the right space. So I guess you just got to sit there and be open and let the space come to you.
So what are you giving it?
3.5 stars.
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Okay, but that's a positive 3.5 stars. It's just it's an obscure little bit of history. Like, I know a bit about it, and I am one of the more intense history nerds going around. So to most people, it's a wildly obscure moment in history, and it's quite an obscure corner of that moment of history because it's not Louis XIV and the Battle of Blenheim. It's this set in Hampton Court Palace, isn't it? I think they were actually in Whitehall, which the palace doesn't survive. But I mean, Hampton Court is older and does survive, so why not use it? Sure. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, 3.5 from me. All right, so Sheridan's changed her pants, and we are ready for the fight of our lives. This relationship may not survive the next 15 minutes.
I might have to change my pants again.
What's next, Sheridan?
Game of Thrones, Season 8.
Season 8.
Think back to where we started.
No, it's just us. We need to end this war.
The season that launched 1.5 million piss babies.
That term is really wrong. Yes, obviously the sense of outrage about Game of Thrones Season 8 is real. The
sense
internet
of entitlement
is alive.
Look, 3 years ago, I remember really clearly when they announced that they were only going to do 2 more seasons, and then they had a year hiatus between Season 7 and Season 8. I remember messaging my brother, who's read the books as well, and I said, I don't see how they can possibly wind this up in, at that point it was 16 episodes, and then they only used 14.
Which I just do not comprehend whatsoever.
Well, I mean, in terms of running time in this season, there were 4 90-minute episodes.
They were offered more running time, though, and they didn't take it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing they were up against is the actors have poured a decade of their lives into this. So many people have poured a decade of their lives that just everyone wanted to move on and do something else.
Look, I would agree with that. Yep, I'd agree with that.
And so it was somewhat that was extremely rushed. Let's just throw that out there right now. It was rushed.
Well, I just think a lot of it was poorly written.
This is where we're going to disagree with each other. Although I'm not going to die in a ditch defending all of the writing either. But I would say the writing was not particularly better or worse than Game of Thrones has always been.
Perhaps. I think, and I'm not a fantasy genre major fan. It's not like my bag. I don't hang out for it or whatever. But one of the most appealing parts of Game of Thrones was that it took genre cliches
and subverted them. Yeah.
And this ends with just cliche after cliche.
Well, hang on, they looked for a long time, like with the Jon Snow character arc, they were going to go from a subversion, and then, it's revealed he's the hidden prince, and then he's cruising to be king of Westeros, and then he doesn't get to be king. Spoilers.
There's going to be spoilers in this, I think.
Yeah, there's going to have to be spoilers in this. So, if you don't want to hear Game of Thrones spoilers, tune out now. For those who are left, let's get our spoil on. So Jon Snow doesn't get to become king of Westeros, and neither does the Golden Princess. So that was hardly cliche.
But okay, so this is my problem with it. They either do cliches or they do things that are entirely out of character for people. Jon Snow murdering Dany is the most out of character act in the entire last season.
He killed Quarren Halfhand in season 3, I believe, maybe 2.
I'm sorry, but that is...
His great mentor.
Who...
Killed him for duty, killed him for the realm.
No. Sorry. He blindsided her.
Yeah, well, because she was about to burn the world. And she was explicitly threatening Winterfell.
Anyway, I just don't think it was in character. And also, what was that with that dragon suddenly becoming an extremely sentient, self-aware being capable of monumental symbolism?
Well, look at the size of its head. And look, I'm sorry, I actually thought that was about right, because Jon had a relationship with Drogon. Jon and Drogon were friends in their own weird little human dragon way. Drogon walks in, something horrible has gone down. It's not, you know, if say you stabbed me in the heart and the dogs walked in on it, they wouldn't bite you or burn you. They'd just be nuzzling me, being really upset about me being dead, wouldn't they?
I don't know. I don't know. A dragon's not like a dog anyway.
I don't think they'd turn around and bite you, though.
They might. I don't think that's not a dragon. Anyway, so that's one
Also,
problem.
we don't know if Jon hasn't picked her up to take her off to some red priests to bring her back to life.
He's out in the banging wildlings beyond the wall.
No, I mean Drogon, the dragon.
Oh, sorry, Drogon. Yeah, who knows? Also,
Bran was very concerned about Drogon's whereabouts.
Let's talk about the failing of Game of Thrones for the women characters, shall we?
Right.
Because
Sansa got to be queen.
Queen of Winterfell.
The Queen of the North.
She could have been. She was a more qualified person to be queen of the whole of Westeros than
She didn't want
Bran.
to. She didn't want it.
She was sitting during that final meeting, and she was like, "What now?" Failing. Arya just.
I think Sansa and Arya both had pretty good endings.
I disagree.
Mm-hmm.
None of those women ended up much better off than when they started.
Arya got given a ship. She hadn't earned that ship. She didn't own that ship. Someone just gave her a ship and said, "Go off and do the voyage of the Dawn Treader."
Anyway, I was frustrated by that.
Right. Would you have preferred Arya marry Gendry and be the lady of
No, I would have
Storm's
rather
End?
some women that were in some positions of real power.
Mm-hmm. You don't think Brienne looked like she was in a position of considerable power at the end?
Oh, and when she's writing that book, she's not even talking about herself. She's just talking about...
She was filling out Jamie's page. When she dies, someone else has to fill out her page.
Glorified him, and he was a douchebag to her.
Oh, because no woman has ever loved a man who was a douchebag to her.
Well, she was very forgiving.
People often are when people are dead.
All right, what else you got for me?
So, there's been a huge amount of criticism, mostly by people who thought... I mean, there are 1,000-odd babies in the world called Daenerys. And then... real babies in the real world called Daenerys, and a lot more called Khaleesi.
There's probably a whole lot of 5-year-olds called Daenerys. That's how long this has been going.
Yeah, but there's like 1,000 a year getting just in the US alone.
Yeah, no, they're not babies anymore. They're actually old enough to be bullied.
So all of those Daenerys fans who were so hardcore that they named their children Daenerys were extremely angry when Daenerys got a bit evil.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that if you actually look back on Daenerys' actions through the course of the whole season, there had been a considerable amount of foreshadowing on that.
Look, I'm actually okay with it. I'm okay with the fact that she burnt everyone. My only issue with it was there's always usually been a bit of an obvious trigger that results in her death and destruction rampages.
Yeah.
But they were ringing the bell and she's sitting there on the dragon and she's like,
okay.
Should I?
Look.
They're ringing the bell. They're surrendering. And she was like, nah, stuff it.
She's up on the dragon. People have been shooting at her.
They were ringing that.
She's already lost 2 dragons.
They were ringing the bell.
They were ringing the bells, yes.
Very
but
clearly.
I can tell you, people flying fighter planes doing close air support missions who get shot at commit a lot of atrocities.
This is not that. This is a fantasy show.
It is, but she was still, in terms of how do people respond in that situations, it was, don't go telling me it's unrealistic, because it happens a lot.
I just didn't think that there was enough narrative support to justify the decision to kill the entire population of King's Landing.
The power went to her head. She was angry about being defied. And people conquering cities. Again, there's so much historical precedent on this. To say it's unrealistic.
I'm fine with it. I just felt as though there could have been some, like, I don't know, like a little street kid just yelled out, "Bugger off, you cowbag."
Mm-hmm.
And then she went, that's just something.
Yep. Now, Jamie's finale. Now, you've never been a member of Team Jamie.
No, because he's a rapist,
Yes.
and everyone's been able to forget about that.
You're okay with the incest and the baby murder, but it was the rape you couldn't handle.
The rape. What was the baby murder?
When he pushed Bran out of the tower in
he was
season
a
1.
child.
He's a very small child.
But no, I'm not okay with that. But my issue is that those things were repeatedly brought up in Jamie's character, and he constantly spoke about being regretful of doing it, but that he did it because he was trying to protect his family and Cersei, who he loved. But they never bring the rape up, ever. In the narrative, the rape is never brought up. And that allows him to get away with it. And that, I've got enough, not me personally, but there's enough of that rubbish going on in real life. I don't need to flick on a fantasy show to see a white dude get away with rape.
Yeah, but he does also do a considerable number of good things. And we've discussed this. No. Can I finish? We've discussed this theme a lot. Glow, the lady wrestling show, explored this in some considerable depth, talking about are you capable of no better than the worst thing you've done?
But it explores it. This doesn't explore it, and it was a scene in the show that's never referred to again, or referred to in very minor.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, I totally get how you interpreted that scene, and how a lot of people interpret that scene.
He did rape her.
How I interpreted that scene. The showrunners have always said that the way they'd written it wasn't the way that scene was interpreted.
I'm sorry. That is just apologetic rubbish.
Okay.
From showrunners that were trying to use sexual violence as an exploitative narrative tool, and then they're trying to cover it up.
Yeah, but I mean, there's sexual exploitation has been a theme of Game of Thrones from season 1.
I totally agree, and sometimes it's not done. There's been some times when I think it's been really, really poorly handled, and this is one of them.
Cool. That is something that happened in, was it season 5 or season 4?
It was around about then, yeah.
Yeah. So, but you're still angry about that?
Well, no, I'm not angry about that. I'm angry about the fact...
How did you want it to be addressed in season 8?
Well, for example, when he's giving the speech to Brienne about all the things that he's done wrong...
Yeah.
He doesn't refer to that.
Well, people do tend to...
He referred to every other thing he did wrong.
Yeah.
And this is a constant in that story arc, and I just find it to be equivalent of rape apologists.
Okay.
And that's what I'm frustrated by it.
All right.
I feel as though as a society we've moved forward where we can perhaps have an open discussion about sexual violence instead of just using it as a bit of equivalent of clickbait, which was a bit of a kind of sexualized scene that was a bit glorified rape.
I mean, it was interesting from a social media management point of view in that they put in a scene like that lights up Twitter in particular.
Yeah.
And knowing that in the end, for all the high-profile people saying, I'm never going to watch this show again because of it, A, those people were still running recaps 2 episodes later, and B, it generated an enormous amount of interest in the show that fed into the success of future seasons.
But I think it's irresponsible storytelling to just use it as a tool to get viewers and clicks. That's irresponsible.
Yeah, I mean, we have no evidence to suggest that they deliberately did that just to get outrage and clicks.
No, I agree, but you posited it in that context.
Sure. It was an interesting theory, but I just wanted to note that we have no evidence on that. Now,
I'm just saying it is frustrating that they haven't actually, to me, done anything to try and close that story off.
Now, another area where there's been considerable outrage was that Jamie slept with Brienne and then went back to Cersei. Now, to me, that again seemed like something that there's a considerable amount of historical precedent for.
I found that to be frustrating because I actually liked the story of Cersei and Brienne as an example of platonic male-female friendship.
Jamie and Brienne.
Sorry.
They are twins.
Who did I say?
Cersei.
Sorry, you're right. Jamie and Brienne. I thought it was a good example of platonic male-female friendship. And there was a couple of sexual tension. There was a little bit. But ultimately I felt as though the story had landed in a place where they were just... It was a story about friendship and professional respect.
But it's not a huge leap to go from friendship and professional respect to... they just survived a big battle where they literally stared death in the face. And then they'd gotten extremely drunk. And in that situation, it is hardly a long stretch for people to seek some comfort in each other's arms, is it?
Yeah, no, I agree, but I didn't get anything out of it. I didn't find it to be rewarding. I found it to be sort of annoying. I didn't need them to get together.
It did set up the payoff of Brienne's ending, where she set about redeeming Jamie's legacy.
I don't think he should be redeemed. He's a douchebag.
Well, she did.
Oh, see, again, this is... you know what? You know who wrote that story arc? You know who wrote that?
Yeah.
A man.
Okay.
A man wrote that.
All right.
That is not what a woman would have done.
I think some women might have done that.
Well, don't mansplain the female mind to me.
Anything else that the fans got outraged about that you want to go into here?
Well, I mean, the Ghost got his pat in the end.
In the end, and he got John back as well. And John, and John got to head off into the north with the wildlings to have sex under waterfalls and run through the woods. And now that they've killed off the Night King, it's safe in those woods, at least until the humans start being horrible to each other again. Yeah. But they have thinned out the population a lot, so there's open spaces to.
I thought Cersei was a bit deserving of a better death myself.
Rather than just being buried in bricks.
Yeah.
Look, I think to broaden the scope a bit, there's a lot of complaint about, say, the Golden Company turned up and then they didn't do anything, or what happened with the plot with the Night King, or why did this character appear and then disappear? And I've got to say, something that always struck me was that when you read real histories, is history is full of things that look like they might have meaning and then didn't. And I've always felt that was one of the strengths of Game of Thrones, and that it was willing to introduce characters, and that turned out they weren't that important.
Yeah, and I guess
that subverts Chekhov's gun, and it's great to see Chekhov's gun subverted.
The thing where the problem with doing it is when you do it in the last season, people get a little bit annoyed because there's an expectation that you'll close things off. So that didn't bother me.
Although, as George R.R. Martin said, and then we can argue about it on the internet forever. That's the fun thing about leaving them open.
I was very disappointed that Arya didn't get to use a face. I mean, what was the point of all that if you couldn't use a face?
Yeah, look, I mean, but in terms of in-world rationalization, how does she generate the faces? How does she store them? How does she keep them?
Well, she was doing a pretty good job of it in season 4. She was flipping them on and off everywhere.
Yeah, but that was when she was still under the guidance of the Faceless Men.
Yes.
So in Westeros, far away from them. I mean, she had made them work at least as far as dealing with the Freys.
Yeah, so she could do it on her own.
Yeah, I'm not sure how her family and companions would have coped with her dealing in black magic like that.
It was just a little bit frustrating because it was kind of like a pretty cool...
She did get to kill the Night King, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Save the world.
How did she jump in there? I mean...
Well, she's a trained assassin.
But how did she get past all the White Walkers?
Well, because Jon was distracting everyone fighting the dragon.
It was a little... naff. I will have to say, one thing I will give this series is... whoever that director is that does all the battle scenes.
Miguel Sapochnik or something like that.
He's amazing. Those episodes that he directs are brilliant. And when there's no dialogue and when they're showing the battle scenes, I know there's a few people that are a bit critical, you know, what happened to all the Dothraki or whatever, but there's a lot of tension, and they're just amazingly choreographed pieces of cinema.
Yeah, and there's a Russian tradition of one-shot cinema. He doesn't actually do it in one shots, but he gives a sense like it's all done in one shot.
He's brilliant.
And the way the action can ebb and flow and have a life of its own.
And the integration of CGI is very authentic. I mean, it's not... It's so... I mean, in 10 years' time, we'll all be saying it doesn't look real, but this is the peak of CGI in these big battle scenes.
Now, the Battle of Winterfell, intriguingly, got a lot of criticism because...
It's too dark.
Too dark, which I thought was an interesting thing simply because it's a show that gets watched by a lot of people on dodgy torrents, and one thing about torrents is the producers have no control over the compression that's applied to their files. And compression is always problematic with black on screen. When I say blacks,
I think it was a bit dodgy on the Foxtel stream on the first run through. Myself.
It wasn't great. Foxtel, our Foxtel, which is how we watch Game of Thrones in Australia, has never been great for the colour black on screen. And this was probably not. I've seen worse in Game of Thrones, but this was the whole episode was in the dark. So.
I mean, that bit though, when the Dothraki go out there with their swords all blaze and they just slowly
the lights go
out. I mean, that is one of the most memorable scenes I've ever seen in any cinema TV.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
Yeah,
and it actually creates so much tension through nothing,
through the unknown, just what's in the darkness. Yeah, and the darkness is always terrifying.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So, I think we need to score this season, and
I'm only scoring this season.
Can we talk about Game of Thrones in general? Having done that though, so what are you going to score this season?
I'm going to score this season 3 stars.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to give it 4. I thought it was not the best Game of Thrones season ever. I'd give that probably to I think season 3, which ended with the Red Wedding.
I think the Red Wedding season was the best as well.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, that's just another example. They just killed character after character in one episode. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And brutally.
Yeah.
And that to me is what made the show so fantastic, and that you only get that with good writing.
Yeah. Although I would still maintain the writing was nowhere near as bad in this as some people have been carrying on about.
I would agree with that, which is why I gave it 3 stars.
Yeah. And I would also say that go back and watch season 1 or season 2. Huge amounts of action happens off screen, and then it's just someone saying, "Oh, so and so's dead," or we lost the battle.
The bodgy costuming in season 1's a bit.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So. I think a lot of people complaining, I wouldn't say all, and I wouldn't say people aren't real fans, a lot of people complaining either haven't been along for the whole ride, or they're remembering the past fondly because it's a long way in the past. And
also there's just the expectation that's been built up, and people don't want to let the show go, so... And, you know, they're disappointed about the show going as well, and they're grieving something, and they're transferring that grief onto criticism about the narrative.
Yeah, and I would also say strongly, and I'm not the first person to say this, but as a fan of the books, I could never have dreamed that this much money and time and effort from supremely talented people would be poured into bringing this story that I love so much onto the screen so I could enjoy it visually. And I'm immensely grateful to everyone involved, and I that's one of the reasons why I get really angry when these twerps start piling onto the show. And they're just ungrateful twerps. There's nothing else for it. Yes, I said 3 years ago this is going to be a rush to finish, and it was. Particularly between the moment where Jon kills Daenerys and Tyrion wakes up in the prison cell, and that's 5 seconds of screen time, and they literally could have fitted a whole season.
Well, at least the whole episode.
But they could have fitted a whole season into the maneuverings between those two scenes. And there were quite a few things that they could have done more. And yes, in season 7, they definitely lost track of time and space as they were trying to bring it all together, and that's unfortunate. But I also just don't see how you can't create a show that spans any more story than this. Not without indentured slaves. Or maybe just doing it animated, where you can swap the talents in and out more interchangeably. But to do it live action, you can't tell any more story. So if you felt the story was rushed, it's just because, age and weariness.
Well, and also, this is the reason George R.R. Martin's having such problems finishing the book, is he's created a world that's so ginormous for himself now that he just can't get out of it. Yeah,
and to criticise Benioff and Weiss for, bad writing, bad storytelling, when George R.R. Martin has been incapable of finishing the story, having had so many years and so much money with which to do it. Grossly unfair. So 4 stars from me for the season. But I would say that as a grand piece of storytelling that is probably going to come to represent this golden age of television that
it definitely
feels like
will.
it's coming to an end now.
A huge game changer. I mean, this is the move of what used to be cinematic filmmaking into the living room.
Yeah.
It's a complete change in the economics of how audiovisual material is presented, really.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff like the Battle of Winterfell was the most simultaneous nights of shooting in any production ever in history. No movie's ever tried to do as much.
No.
And the budget numbers don't reflect that because there's so many sunk costs in Game of Thrones. The costumes and the props are already there to be used, so it's not like in a movie where all these things
come out and
upfront costs.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I think that's us done for the week.
It is.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about Game of Thrones now that I've shut up?
I feel sorry for all those people that really wanted to watch it in the last season and then realised that they were too late to start watching it from the beginning.
It's a bit like my friends who jumped into Avengers Endgame without having watched the rest of the Marvel. It's nice you decided to come along, but
You're just a little late.
There was a great meme just before the season started, which is like, it's over. If you haven't caught up, winter is here.
It's too late.
But look, if you've listened to this, obviously with some bemusement, having not watched Game of Thrones, I would say you've got to be patient with season 1, because when they made it, they didn't know they were ever going to make the rest of it. But even then, season 1 has such an amazing twist at the end of it that it's going to blow your mind. Give it a go. Get on board. It's great. Cool. Okay. Well, if you enjoyed this, please do email us at gmtrpodcast@gmail.com to let us know your thoughts and feelings, and why you think the writers stuffed up the show. And otherwise, leave some messages on social, and do please give us stars on the Apple Podcast app, which is the only thing that matters in podcasting, and write some reviews. Come on, you lazy people. You've had 47 minutes of this and you haven't given us a review, have you? Come on. You can do it.
Get in there.
Good night.
Good night.